Chassanim. And where have you been the whole time? Now you wake up now, it's got all these little quetchalot to do. Right.
Hemshech Samech Vav, page Kuf Samech Dalid, half base Iyar, Hatavshin Samech Es.
In the old days in Yeshiva, we had guys that they didn't care a hang about all the Narishkeit. The guys that have been in all the Narishkeit 50 times more than any of you guys have. You guys are amateurs and absolute gornish like these fellows we had at the beginning of the program. They'd been in all the minisachen and they had a tremendous chuk to leave it all behind and get into the message of Tom Fitzman. That's what they wanted. They didn't care a hang where they were or what they slept in. Nowadays everybody's complaining, we lost him this Tutsim, we lost him this Yen, this computer, and he had mich a telephone with the other Sachen, he can't live and he can't stay salt. What's what you got? Come on. I don't even have a telephone. Zeggen zich op dus. Hoe is het darf man dat zeggen? Dat is toch een schrikkelijke zaak. Het ene was meshabed door mens and draws him into tipjes and heaven. Hoe is het af en toe? Alright, so now we get back to, we got to shoot up into the cave after as I'm in sort of beginning. Anyway, so we sort of, today to understand the Indian, we sort of were two oifanim of his havas, of coming into being of entities or ilamas or spheres, and that was what we saw, Gilui Ahelem, and the other was in even from Yesh Mi'ayin. And we saw that Gilui Ahelem was really just Shocha B'derech Seida V'Hadroga. What was Lamaila in a higher state just came down and revealed itself B'derech Seida V'Hadroga, almost what we might call Ila V'Olu. It comes down and reveals itself in a lower Madrega. Gilui, revelation of the Helem, or that which was hidden in a higher darker. Aber ein bezesh hatches, it's not a really new Isgalas. It's not what we call a Gilui Chodosh, or to use the expression, his Chadshus, a new entity that's come into being, because it was really there in the higher state, but it came down, but Yerida Beseda Vadroga, as we pointed out. The Ilo de Inifa Yesh Mi'ayin, we saw that Yesh Mi'ayin is that the Yesh which comes from the ayin has no connection cloud with the ayin from which it comes, and it comes for dilug, jumping of the madrigas altogether in a way that there's no open connection between the yesh and the ayin which brought it about. And that's what we call a gilui shaloba hadrogya. In other words, a gilui which is ein aroich, it has no comparison one to the other. And derech agav, that's the way the whole yesh agashmi comes into being from Elikus, and even for yesh mi'ayin, but that's what a tremendous inyan in the yesh mi'ayin, which is called in the Sifrei HaChoikrim, it's called ein lecho yesh mi'ayin godel mizeh. That's the most extreme example of yesh mi'ayin. However, we find that these inyanim in the Shor Rishon, that is Galas Elikus, how it led to the coming about of the Elamas, there's also two such gradations, or inyanim, ayin from Gila Helem and ayin from Yesh Mi'ayin. And we saw that the ayin from the Esa Spheres, the Atzilas, are at the moment our particular concern. Now everybody's familiar with the fact that the word Atzilus is not yet a created world. The three created worlds are Bria, Yetzira, Vasio, but they come about after Malchus Atzilus. In other words, after the soft madregas of Olam Atzilus, then we have the three created worlds. And the three created worlds are Brio, Yeshmi, Ayin Mamish. Like we said, that the Ika Yeshmi Ayin is Dafki Bo Olam Hazeh. Mashenkin, the word Atzilus per se, well, that's only of Gila Elikus, purely Chas v'sholem ein b'zeh inyan shel yesh or brio yesh mino ayin. And therefore, the point being made here at the beginning of this Maimah is that Atzilus is really what we call Giluya Ahelim. The Esa Sphiras Araya in Atzilus, what albeit they're the Shoirish of all the Inyanim of Esa Sphiras and all the elements which are to come, or they came about in a Eifan that they misgala from a higher state, where they were in a state of higher Iskalus in Elikus, and they just came down b'derech hadroga and were miskala in Olam HaAtzilus. And then after the inyan from Olam HaAtzilus, Sofoi, at the end of Olam HaAtzilus, in Malchus, there's a koyach which produces the Gimel Olamas Bria Yetzira Vasiya b'derech Yeshmi Ayin. So we're saying that inyan in the Esa Sphiras, the Atzilus, which is still Elikus, well, that's called Odom. And we saw that the word Odom can also be touched in two Oifanim or two Drochim. Aleph, the etymonium of Odom, by definition, is a series of interrelated madrigas like we have by dimension itself. The dimension is a combination of a whole series of interrelated and interfunctioning madrigas. And then we saw that the word Odom can also be based on the Pasuk in Yeshaya Novi, in which it was written about Melech Bavel, Adameh Elyoin, I will compare myself to the Most High. Meaning that the word Odom also has the idea of comparison to something which is incomparably higher than it, but nonetheless a comparison. So, Berega, that you say Adameh Elyoin, I will be compared to the High One, well, that means there's some basis of comparison, that you're comparing this to this, means that they have some sort of a erech one to the other. Mashiach, we pointed out, if we're talking yesh mi ayin, then yesh mi ayin has no erech of one to the other. So if we're going to say then that Atzilus is called Odom for those two reasons, first of all, it has itself the inyan from Esa Sphiras, and those Esa Sphiras are interrelated madrigas, and the second and Ika reason what we're concerned with here is that Adameh Elyoin is compared to the Most High. Then we have to find in what way is Atzilus compared to the Most High. In other words, what madriga does it come from? And if we're saying it's compared to the Most High, then it must be from Giluya Helem, because the two levels which have a certain comparison, one to the other. That's the union of Giluya Helem. So therefore, we wanted to establish that was in two madrigas or two Oifanim. That we could say that Atzilus was Adameh Elyoin, it was Giluya Helem, and therefore compared in a clolistic way to the higher madriga from which it came, to a madriga called Ak, and then to what we call Klolis Hakav. Ach and Klolis Hakav. And so we pointed out in the diagrams and things that we drew the other night that Ak was the first Gilui of Olamas after the Tzimtzum Harishon. And the first appearance after the Tzimtzum Harishon is called Odom Kadmon. And we said it's not customary in Lubavitch to keep repeating that phrase. The two words Odom and Kadmon are expressed by the abbreviation Ak. But however we examine each of them, we see that the word Odom once again comes in. Odom meaning the idea of interrelated levels. And the inyan for Kadmon means primordial. Well, that means it's got some connection still with the primordial light, meaning the unlimited light that was there prior to the Tzimtzum. So that's the inyan of Ak, which is a form of almost what you might call a paradox, that on the one hand it's already Odom, meaning madrigas and interrelated madrigas, which are not shaykh in the Iyar Shalifnei the Iyar Aposhut, which was there prior to the Tzimtzum. However, we say that they still have in themselves a certain trace of the unlimitedness that they had prior to the Tzimtzum, and therefore they're called Kadmon. But the truth of the matter is that the word Kadmon is really a borrowed word in that regard, because you can't really say it's Kadmon in the Emerson sense, because there's already been the Tzimtzum Harishain. And the Tzimtzum Harishain has already brought limitation into everything. And therefore we can't really say Kadmoin in the Emerson sense, but we call them Kadmoin because they're still so entwined and bottled inside the divine light that they're not separate identifiable entities. And therefore the Esther spirits they are in Ak. Are what we call Betaklis Abshitas Vaiskalalis, that they have no real revealed entity yet, but they're potentially there. And potentially in the sense that they really have a form of existence. And therefore, it's Atzilus is only like a series of derivations from that level, which they go from Darga to Darga, through which the spheres come out in more detail and they gradually reveal themselves in a more tangible way. And therefore, Atzilus is called Adamele Elyon Legabi Ak. So that's one thing. And then he said there's another Inyan, that it's also Adamele Elyon Legabi de Klolos Hakav. We drew you the diagram, we showed you that after the Tzimtzum, which was a Inifan Siluk, a removal of the divine light, the Eibishter brought into that vacuum that he'd made, Kaviochel, he brought into that a limited line form of revelation, which is called the Kav. Now that Kav, as we saw in the diagram that we drew, that is linked and Nogea, it touches the circle which indicates the infinite divine light prior to the Tzimtzum. So it's connected, it's linked with the Tzimtzum, but it goes down the form of a limited, tremendously limited form of revelation. It can be called a line, and it only goes down into the Mokum Panui, into the vacuum. It doesn't actually touch the other edge, because if it did, then it would be just Niklal and bottle in the whole Inyan of the Habilti. And that's the Inyan of the Kav. Now the Kav is the first appearance after the Tzimtzum, and all of the other Gilumim which occur in all the Eilam developed one way or another from the Kav. And what he means by the expression Klolos HaKav, he means the first Gilu of the Kav, even before it gives rise to Adam Kav Ak, which we just mentioned before, which is the first, Yisav is the first coming about after the Tzimtzum. But there's a Gilu of the Kav, how it is even before it begins that. And that's what we call the union of Atik Sheba Ak, or that's our componim, the Klolos HaKav, the generality of the whole idea of a limited light, which is first appearance is being made from the Iyar Habilti, the Iyar Habilti Bagvul, how it is immediately after the Tzimtzum, and that's called Klolos HaKav. So the Rebbe says that the Inyan from Atzilas, the Esser spirits, that they come out into identified Gilui in Olam Atzilas, they're also Adamel Elyon, they're also compared to the Klolos of the Kav. Now, why would we say that? The Klolos HaKav is even higher than Ak, as we just pointed out. Because we want to say, in the previous Maimon the Rebbe explained, that the Inyan of the Kav, albeit it's connected and linked with the Iyar HaKlali, with the Iyar HaBilti, but it goes through the Tzimtzum, and it's nimshach only al yidei, what you might call the effect of the Tzimtzum. And therefore the Kav in Be'etzem Inyona, as you might call it, in the very essence of its makeup, the Kav is already Gvul. It's already the Iyar has become Mugbal al yidei the Tzimtzum, which is the Koyach HaGvul B'lavochi, even though it's Nogeya and it touches the Iyar HaBlivo, and it's nimshach from the Iyar HaBlivo, but Be'etzem Mahusai, it's a Inyan already of Gvul. And therefore, albeit the Klolos HaKav, which the Rebbe calls it here, is L'mayla Mi Ak, it's beyond the whole concept of Ak, but since it's Be'etzem, the Gilui of the Koyach HaGvul, how it's affected the Iyar, and the Iyar has become limited light, as you might say, Be'etzem Mahusai, and therefore, the Esser spirits, the Atzilas, but their limitation, their Kelim and Oiris, but they're the idea of specific Gilu and specific limitation, they're also Adamel Elyon, even Legabi the Klolos HaKav, in other words, even Legabi the Madrega the Kav, which is higher than Ak. Not just Legabi Ak, but even Legabi what he calls here the Klolos HaKav. due to the fact that we're going here. Now later on, I don't want to say later on, I mean it might be years before we get there, but another couple of Maimorim a little bit further ahead, that I was going to go with another shit in the Kav. There are two approaches to the Kav. But here we're going to a more simple approach to the Kav. That the Kav is BMS by definition, the Indian of the Iyar, how it's become mubal through the Koach HaTimtum, and it's become Mamish Iyar Gevuli, even though it's Shoyre is in the Shlefnei HaTimtum. And that we're going to have to deal with, because that's almost like a paradox. If you come from something which is bleakful, then how can you become Gvuli? What made you BMS, the Indian from Gvul? We'll maybe have to wrestle with that one as we go along, but suffice it to say that that's how it is Lepoyo for the moment. And afar, we say that the Esesphiras Dachilas are Adamele Elyon Lekabi the Klal Sakav. However, later on the Rebbe is going to say that we can understand the Kav maybe differently, and that's going to lead us to a different view of what it means that Atzilus is Adamele Elyon Achoponim in that regard, as regards the Kav. As regards Ak, it will still remain the case. However, that's the Indian of Atzilus, how it is Gilui HaHelem and Adameh LeElyon. And we saw that we had immediately on that a question, and we said that it's written in Iyar, it's written at Pasik V'Chochma Me'ayin Timotzei, that the beginning of Olam HaTzilus, the first Sphira in all the Esesphiras, which is Sphiras HaChochma, that came about from the ayin. It came about from a level in a way of Timotzei. What Timotzei means, Metzia, something that you find without knowing where it came from. But that's the meaning of Yeshmi Ayin. That's what the indicative of this other concept of Yeshmi Ayin. So you can't have your cake and eat it too. We just said that Atzilus is Adamele Elyon in the sense that it's only Gilui HaHelem, and therefore it can be compared to the higher Madrigas because it comes only to B'derech Gilui HaHelem. But if I say that Chochma is really Me'ayin Timotzei, then that tends to indicate that Atzilus came about Yesh Me'ayin and not Gilui HaHelem. And so therefore how does that fit in? Nisbu Aliyel, the Rebbe began to explain that by saying it's already been explained above. The Mash Atzilus hu Adameh LeElyon. Whatever we say that Atzilus is only Gilui HaHelem. Therefore it can be compared to the higher Madrigas, it's Adameh LeElyon. Ainu Legabi Ak. That's only Legabi, as we said, the Olam, which is the first Olam. V'gam Legabi Klal Sakav. Also Legabi, the generality of the Kav, meaning the Indian of the Kav out's even higher than Ak, as we just pointed out. Ki, why can we say that? Ki Beis Mini Amshochas Yesh. There are two forms of derivation of Elikus. Aleph, is Gvul Umida. That's how the Eibishter is able to give forth from himself Hamshocha, a derivation and a revelation, which is in from Gvul and measurement, literally. Gvul, limitation, and middle measurement. Hainu Gilui HaKav. That means, and as we pointed out, that here we're going with that approach, that the Kav in its very essence, from the very first moment of its revelation, the Kav is limited light. It's the Indian of limitation. Therefore, it'll be the first appearance of limitation after the Tzimtzum, because prior to the Tzimtzum, everything was unlimited. Everything was only the simple, unlimited light prior to the Tzimtzum. So therefore, said the Rebbe, the Indian of the first Oifen of Gilui Elikus, which is Gvul Umida, we can say that that's the Kav. And therefore, we saw that the Klolos HaKav, even the Kav at its very first moment of Gilui, even prior to Ak, then it's completely Midah Ugvul. The base of the second form of derivation of Elikus is B'chinas Ein Tzei. The Indian for Elikus, how it is unlimited, absolutely unlimited, Ein Tzei. Shazo ha'ores B'chinas Malchus Ein Tzei. What that is, the revelation, or the how do you call it, the luminescence in the form of Gilui of what we call Malchus Ta'ein Seif. Now this expression, Malchus Ta'ein Seif, is a lashon from the Kisvei Arizal, and we need to sort of define it a little bit carefully, even though it's slightly tricky, but it doesn't really need to be as tricky as it sounds. When you say Malchus to Ein Seif, you're using two terms which tend to contradict one another, because Malchus indicates a sphera or a limitation, a specific entity, and Ein Seif indicates something which is completely unlimited. So how can you have Malchus to Ein Seif? So it's put down in the Kisvei Arizal that even in the Iyar which preceded the Tzimtzum, the first is galus of light from the Atzmus himself. What that was the Iyar, the simple light that filled up the whole so-called hollow. There was no room for anything, as you might say. And the Tzimtzum revealed the hollow. Well, that light also had in itself certain gradations. And Chassidus talks about it at great length. There's a famous mimer from the Alter Rebbe, and also in the Kutei Torah and in other places. Chassidus says that nonetheless there were like gradations in that unlimited light. It wasn't just purely and utterly one madrega. Therefore, the Arizal says himself in a certain place in the Eitz Chaim, he says that when we say Malchus to Ein Seif, he uses the expression kilu noima, as if we're saying like a madrega achrona in the Iyar Ein Seif. In other words, that there was like a gradation within the Iyar Ein Seif, that it wasn't on the same high level as it was in the first appearance from the Atzmas. So how can you talk about levels in something which is absolutely unlimited and Ein Seif? So the truth of the matter is that you can talk about possibility of levels. The only thing is that those levels won't really have any yachas one to the other, because each one of them will be absolutely unlimited. And so therefore, we can say certain gradations within that Iyar, but we have to say that they don't have the normal understanding of spheres or limitations, and therefore yachas one to the other. No, each one is another form of the infinite. In other words, that the infinite being as he is, all powerful, how they call it, omnipotent, he can reveal himself in different oifanim, and therefore the Eibishter revealed himself in an oifan of what we call malchus. In other words, he made the light in such a way that the tzimtzum would be able to affect it. Because the tzimtzum being a inim from gvul, how can it possibly affect something which is believable? If you look in Tanya, Perik Mem Ches, we learned not all that long ago in the Chittas, the Alter Rebbe says that something which is believable compared to something which is gvul, ein leze kol erech or yachas klal. And therefore he uses the expression over there that something which you count. You can count billions and trillions of it. You can count in the highest possible way that you can imagine number, but if you compare that with something which is beyond number altogether, then it's like one. It's like absolute nothing. It doesn't matter how many trillions of it you counted. It can be bligvul, and as it called erech klal. So therefore, how can you say that in the divine light, which was absolutely unlimited and infinite, and it was bligvul and Ein Seif, with the whole shlemus of that understanding, and all of a sudden it came along a koya gvuli and was nimshuk from it? How can that happen? Or what happened? How can you limit it if it's unlimited? Yeah, what is it the purest percent? So you can say, well, the Avish is unlimited, and just like he can produce something which is bligvul, then he can also limit the bligvul. In other words, we'll say that was a gilui of the omnipotence of Hashem, and he used his omnipotence and he limited it. So, ultimately, we have to say that. But it's well known that everything that the Eibishter made in all these madregas, even in the madregas Aki Elyonos, he made it be'ezeshu oifen that ultimately man would be able to appreciate how that could happen. In other words, that even though the Eibishter did things which are only mitzad his omnipotence, he did them in such a way that be'ezeshu derech, the mensch would be able to appreciate, oh yes, I can understand how that happened, even though it might demand a tremendous effort on his part to understand that, or at least he'll be able to say that he can understand Shador Kazek Kara. And that's what we find that Koheles, Shlomo HaMelech says in a Pasuk, he said, "V'gam eso'ilam nosan balibo." Everything which happens, the whole Hisavas, beginning from the Atzma Saint Seif all the way down to this world, it's all put into the heart of the mensch. In other words, that the Eivishter did it all in Azar, even that ultimately the mensch would be able to have some understanding in his limited knowledge, how could this happen? And you can't just come along and say to the mensch, oh, it's all in our even for omnipotence, because then the mensch has no picture of how could it really happen. All he knows is that it happens, and therefore he has no relativity to the whole thing. And the amazing thing is that the Eibishter wanted that we should go back through all these madregas, right, back to Atzma Saint Seif, understanding, as it were, our way. The Eibishter wanted that we should appreciate everything he did. And therefore, on that basis, the Iyar Ein Seif, which is Bilti Gvul, undergoes certain, almost what you might call tzimtzumim in itself, which are not tzimtzumim in the simple sense, but they're gradations downward that don't alter the actual Ein Seif, yes, but they make it possible that the Iyar, that the Koyach HaGvul will be able to appear and affect that light. And that's what we call Malchus the Ein Seif. Well, that's what we mean by saying Malchus the Ein Seif. But in that Kufa, the Malchus is only one aspect of it. The Ika is the Ein Seif. It's still completely. I do not want to move the table. We must tell Rabbi Lebanon to buy this tripod. I spoke with him today, but I didn't mention it with him. It's very important. We should have the right material. What are you looking for? Hey, you want to support it with something?
Yes, something heavy. You said not to use it for him, so I'm looking for.
I don't know what to say.
Yeah. Oh, yes, you should just continue.
I think it's a pull from this one. I think it's a pull from this.
The rear